The terminal buzzed with the usual airport rhythm. Wheels rolling across tile, boarding announcements echoing overhead, and the occasional frustrated sigh of travelers delayed by weather or fate. Callista Dwyer gripped the handle of her stroller like her life depended on it. Her eyes darting between signs and faces, scanning for something or someone. Beneath a red plaid blanket, her infant daughter, Isolde, slept silently, as if untouched by the chaos swirling around them. But Callista's pulse throbbed in her ears. She wasn't just nervous, she was terrified. That morning, she had received a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo, a face from her past, long buried and never spoken of, accompanied by a timestamp and location. JFK, 3:12 p.m. She'd stared at the image until her vision blurred. Couldn't be real, could it? She had taken every step to disappear, changed names, moved across the country, burned the last pieces of her former life. And yet, the message found her. She hadn't told anyone, not Thatcher, her husband, who was waiting for her on the other coast, not the airline staff. She had simply boarded the plane with Isolde, sat in silence the entire flight, and now moved through the airport as if every second could be her last moment of peace. Just get through the exit. Just get to the car. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A snarl tore through the air, sharp and primal, sending a ripple of panic across the terminal. A German shepherd broke formation, dragging its handler, a tall, grizzled man in a K9 unit vest named Orson Keene, toward Callista and the stroller. The dog's growl deepened, lips curled back over white teeth, tail stiff like a rod. Travelers gasped, some screamed, others froze in place. Phones went up, eyes locked in. The dog wasn't attacking a person, it was going for the stroller. For Isolde. Callista screamed, instinctively yanking the stroller backward, panic turning her voice raw. "Stop! My baby's in there!" Her words cracked through the noise. Orson's voice was authoritative, unwavering. "Ma'am, step away now." Two more officers rushed to contain the scene as the dog barked violently, straining at the leash, fixated. It wasn't backing down. It had found something it wasn't trained to ignore. Heart pounding, Callista let go of the stroller, hands trembling, eyes wide with dread. The crowd held its breath. Orson slowly approached, reaching toward the plaid blanket with deliberate care. Coda growled low, pacing beside him like a shadow sensing a storm. And as the blanket lifted, the truth beneath it would not only silence the entire terminal, it would alter everything Callista thought she knew about her child. The blanket slipped back in Orson Keene's gloved hands, the fabric trembling ever so slightly as it revealed what lay beneath. The air in the terminal thickened, the tension stretching taut like a cable about to snap. Isolde's tiny face came into view, peaceful, serene, her small chest rising and falling in soft rhythm. But Coda didn't stop growling. In fact, his reaction intensified. He lowered his snout, sniffed closer to the padding beneath the baby, then barked again, sharper, more urgent. Orson's jaw clenched. He'd seen this before. Not often, but enough to trust what it meant. Coda wasn't reacting to the child. He was reacting to something with her. Gently, Orson slid his hand under the mattress lining of the stroller. For a moment, there was nothing, just soft padding. Then he felt it, an unnatural edge beneath the foam. Thin, flat, metallic. His eyes narrowed. "We need bomb squad now," he muttered to the officer beside him. But he kept his voice low, careful not to ignite panic. Callista's legs buckled. She dropped to her knees, arms shaking. "What are you doing? What's happening?" she cried, her voice raw with confusion. The words barely left her mouth when two officers moved in to hold her back. "Ma'am, you need to remain calm. For your child's safety." The words sounded mechanical, rehearsed, like a script for a crisis. But nothing about this felt procedural to Callista. It felt personal, deliberate. She stared at the stroller in disbelief. She had packed it herself that morning. Every item, every bottle, every toy, nothing had been out of place. She hadn't even let Isolde out of her sight since they left the house. So how could there be something inside it that triggered a federal-trained K-9 unit? Her thoughts spiraled, unraveling every memory from the last 24 hours. The message, the photo, the stranger's eyes in the terminal back in San Diego. Had someone slipped something in without her knowing? In the distance, the terminal lights flickered once, subtle but noticeable. Over the intercom, an announcement stuttered and then cut off entirely. Orson looked up, his instincts flaring. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just about a baby stroller. This was coordinated. His gaze scanned the crowd. People had stopped moving. A strange hush had fallen over the terminal. Eyes darted. Tension coiled in every corner. Then Coda barked again, this time turning his head sharply to the left, toward a man in a brown jacket who had just turned away from the scene, and was walking quickly toward a side exit. Orson's eyes narrowed. In his years with the K-9 unit, he'd learned to trust Coda's reactions more than his own gut, and Coda was no longer focused on the stroller. He was locked onto the man in the brown jacket, who had just exited the circle of onlookers and was moving deliberately through the crowd. Not running. That would be too obvious. But fast enough to signal he had no intention of sticking around. "Coda, heel," Orson ordered quickly, unclipping the leash. The dog was already moving, weaving through legs and rolling suitcases with surgical precision. Orson followed close behind, shouting over his shoulder to the officers by the stroller. "Secure the perimeter. Don't let anyone leave this terminal." But he already knew it might be too late. Callista watched the scene unfold from the floor, her breathing shallow, her arms wrapped around her midsection as if she could keep herself from falling apart completely. She looked down at Isolde, now cradled in an officer's arms a few feet away. The baby hadn't cried once, not even stirred. A dull numbness crawled into Callista's chest. The stroller, the hidden object, now a man trying to disappear. None of it made sense unless someone had planted something on her, or worse, had used her. Who was he? She whispered, half to herself. Her mind clawed at the memory of earlier. She remembered a man bumping into her just outside the restroom near Gate 7. She hadn't seen his face, just a gruff sorry. And the way he'd touched the side of the stroller, too casually to be casual. Could that have been him? Meanwhile, Coda was gaining ground. The man in the brown jacket glanced back, saw the dog, and broke into a sprint. It was all Orson needed. "Airport security, freeze!" he bellowed, drawing his weapon as he ran. But the man had a head start, and the crowd created a maze of obstacles. People screamed and scattered as the chase escalated. A janitor's cart crashed over. A mother grabbed her child out of the way just as the suspect shoved past. Then, just before reaching the maintenance exit, the man reached into his pocket. Orson's heart stopped. "Don't do it!" he shouted. Coda lunged. The suspect spun around and everything slowed. A silver object flew from his hand. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key, and it slid across the floor, straight toward the stroller Callista had abandoned. The key skidded across the polished tile, making a metallic clink as it spun to a stop just inches from the stroller. Callista's eyes locked on it. Small, silver, worn down along the teeth. Her heart pounded louder than the noise around her. Something about that key pulled at her memory, like a dream half-remembered but deeply unsettling. Then a rush of footsteps broke her trance. Orson tackled the man to the ground before he reached the door, Coda growling low as he hovered near the suspect's legs. The man didn't resist, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. He stared straight ahead, calm, as if being caught had always been part of the plan. Orson flipped him over, pressing a knee into his back. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What's in that stroller?" But the man didn't answer. He only smirked, eyes flicking past Orson's shoulder toward Callista, who stood frozen like stone. Callista stepped forward slowly, her gaze moving between the key and the stranger now pinned to the ground. Her voice trembled. Do I know you?" she asked. It sounded absurd even to her, but something in his face tugged at a deep, buried recognition. The curve of his jaw, the look in his eyes. It wasn't familiarity, it was warning. And the longer she looked at him, the more something inside her screamed that this wasn't random. It was targeted. She bent down and picked up the key with shaky fingers. As soon as her skin touched the metal, a memory flashed in her mind, brief and jagged. A dusty basement, a locked metal box, a voice whispering, "If you ever see him again, run." The key wasn't new. It was old, from a place she'd left behind nearly a decade ago, when she changed her name, disappeared, and erased every trace of the girl she used to be. She looked down at her daughter. "Callista?" One of the officers said cautiously. "Do you know what that opens?" "I think," she whispered, barely breathing. "It opens something I was never supposed to find again." Orson approached slowly, his eyes darting between her and the suspect, who still hadn't said a word. "Who is he to you?" She looked up at Orson, face pale. "I don't know. I thought I didn't." She paused, swallowing the knot in her throat. "But I think he knows everything about me." And then, without warning, the man on the floor finally spoke. Just 4 words, soft and deliberate. "She's not your daughter." Callista's world tilted. The words, "she's not your daughter," echoed in her skull like a bomb detonating in a quiet room. Every sound in the terminal fell away. The murmurs, the gasps, even the officers shouting commands. None of it reached her. All she could hear was the beat of her own heart, loud and erratic, and the haunting certainty in the man's voice. Her knees threatened to give again, but she remained standing, gripping the silver key like it might anchor her to reality. "No," she said aloud, barely recognizing her own voice. "You're lying." Her eyes darted to Isolde, still swaddled, still silent, in the arms of a uniformed agent. Callista had carried that child in her womb. She had felt every kick, every contraction. She remembered the cold delivery room, the pain, the exhaustion. That baby was hers. She had to be, but doubt seeped in like smoke under a door. What if she wasn't? What if, somehow, everything she remembered had been manipulated? Orson stood frozen beside the suspect, who still hadn't moved. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Explain that now, or you're not making it out of here in one piece." The man chuckled, a sound that made Orson's blood run cold. "You think this is about a stroller?" he said, turning his head just enough to look Callista in the eyes. "It's about her, and what she was born for." That phrase hit Callista harder than the first. Born for? Isolde was just a baby, just a little girl. What could she possibly be born for that would make a man chase them through an airport? Or hide something in her stroller? Or claim she wasn't hers at all? The key burned cold in her palm. She had to know the truth. But where would she even begin? "Take him to a secure room," Orson growled, signaling 2 agents. "And don't take your eyes off him." As the suspect was lifted to his feet, he locked eyes with Callista once more and smiled, calm, cruel, as if he knew the next thing she would do. And maybe he did, because Callista, with shaking hands and a heart ready to break, turned to the nearest officer and said, "I need to get to a storage facility. There's a lockbox in Brooklyn. I think this key belongs to it." Orson nodded grimly. "Then let's go." But just as they began to move, Coda barked again, violently, urgently, and turned his snout toward a black duffel bag near Gate C4. Another piece of the nightmare had just been found. The duffel bag sat alone, unclaimed, next to a row of metal chairs near Gate C4. It looked ordinary. Faded black canvas, worn handles, a small red tag dangling from the zipper. But Coda's reaction made it anything but ordinary. He barked in short, clipped bursts, his body tense and his tail rigid. Orson had seen that posture only twice before, both times during active threat situations. He didn't wait. "Evacuate this wing. Now!" He barked into his radio. Possible secondary device. Passengers scattered in waves. Screams echoed through the terminal as uniformed agents began to push people back, creating a wide perimeter. Callista was ushered behind a barrier by 2 officers, but her eyes remained locked on the bag. Her mind raced. Why now? Why another piece? She thought the danger was over with the man in custody. But clearly that was only the beginning. Her grip tightened around the key. Whatever was inside that bag, it was meant to be found after he was caught. Orson knelt next to Coda and scanned the bag visually. No wires, no ticking, no signs of a traditional explosive. Still, he waited for the bomb squad. In the meantime, he asked one of the responding agents to scan the bag's tag. A moment later, the result came through his earpiece. The bag was checked in under a false name. The address led to a storage unit in Queens, registered to someone who had died 2 years ago. A dead man had checked in a bag no one claimed. Until now, back behind the barricade, Callista couldn't keep still. Her body trembled, her thoughts circling one horrifying possibility after another. She turned to the agent beside her. "Please," she said, "just let me see inside. I need to know what this is. I know it's connected." The officer hesitated, clearly under orders to keep her out of the danger zone. But her voice was urgent, grounded in desperation that felt too real to ignore. "If it's from the same people who sent that key," she added, "then it's not random. It's a message." After what felt like hours compressed into minutes, the bomb squad arrived. The lead technician moved carefully, using a robotic arm to unzip the duffel bag while everyone held their breath. Coda growled low. The zipper slid down in slow, metallic rhythm. The flap opened. Inside the bag was no bomb, just a single manila folder. Orson reached for it, pulled it open, and his eyes widened as he flipped through the first few pages. Names, locations, medical records. But what caught his attention most was a birth certificate. Callista's name was on it, but the baby listed wasn't Isolde. Orson flipped the birth certificate again, as if reading it a second time might change what he was seeing. But the details remained the same. The mother was listed as Callista Dwyer. The hospital was one she'd never been to. The date of birth was exactly the same as Isolde's. But the name printed under child was not Isolde Dwyer. It was Adeline Grace Whitmore. A chill spread through his chest. This wasn't a clerical error. This was planted, precise, meant to be found at this exact moment. Callista stared at the folder, then at Orson, and finally at the paper in his hands. "That's not her name," she said softly, stepping forward. Her voice cracked with disbelief. "I named her Isolde. I remember signing the certificate myself." She stopped, her breath catching in her throat. "What is this?" she whispered. She wanted anyone, to tell her this was some twisted mistake. But no one did, because deep down, part of her knew it wasn't. The bomb technician handed Orson another document from the bag. An old photo, black and white, dated nearly 30 years ago. A newborn in a hospital bassinet. On the back, Project Cerberus, Phase 1. Orson's stomach sank. He'd heard whispers of that codename before, buried deep in defense briefings. Off-the-books research, experimental programs shut down decades ago. Supposedly, "This wasn't just about you," he said to Callista. "This was always about her." Callista felt the room tilt. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That my baby is some... what, experiment?" Her eyes darted again to Isolde, sleeping in an agent's arms nearby. Still calm, still eerily quiet. "That's not possible. I carried her. I gave birth to her." She shook her head violently. "This doesn't make sense." Orson hesitated. What if the person you gave birth to was switched? What if you were chosen for this because of something in your past you don't even remember? He hated the words as they came out, but the truth was unfolding whether they were ready or not. The key, the stranger, the folder, it was all linked, and none of it pointed to coincidence. Before Callista could respond, one of the agent's radios crackled. "We've got movement at the holding cell," the voice said. "The suspect, he's gone." Orson turned sharply. "Gone? How?" The answer came back like a knife through the air. "He had help." The moment the word "gone" echoed through the radio, a wave of dread washed over Callista. The man, the one who had stared into her soul and told her that Isolde wasn't her daughter, had escaped. And not alone. Someone on the inside had helped him. Orson's expression shifted instantly from controlled tension to cold fury. "Lock down the terminal," he ordered. already moving. Double security on every exit. And get me surveillance from the last 10 minutes. But Callista didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the folder in her hands, its weight suddenly unbearable. She flipped through the documents again. Pages filled with dense medical jargon, genetic codes, lists of donors, mothers, test results. There were references to neurological development, behavioral conditioning, even chemical stimulation in utero. It didn't make sense. Unless it wasn't supposed to. Unless she had been part of it from the beginning without even knowing. A silent subject. A womb selected. A child altered. In the corner of the folder, almost missed, was a photograph she hadn't noticed before. It was of her, Callista, taken years ago, candid, maybe even before she changed her name. In the photo, she was stepping out of a clinic she didn't recognize. Behind her, barely visible, was a logo she couldn't place. Until now. She turned the image toward Orson. This place. It's where they took me after the accident. Before I moved away. Before I changed everything. Orson took the photo and squinted. Whitestone Medical Research. That facility was shut down 10 years ago. He paused, then corrected himself. Or, that's what we were told. If you were treated there, and they had access to your medical records, your DNA... His voice trailed off. It wasn't just about Isolde anymore. It was about how Isolde came to be. Callista gripped the stroller, feeling her hands shake. So what does that make her? She asked, her voice low, almost inaudible. If she's not mine, but I gave birth to her. What is she? She looked at Isolde again, her tiny hands curled into perfect fists, her face still peaceful. She looks just like me. Because she is you, Orson said carefully. Or, she's a version of you, genetically engineered, modified. Whatever they were doing at Whitestone, it wasn't about medicine. It was about replication. Before Callista could even react, her phone buzzed. A text. No number. No sender. If you want to keep her, come alone. Midnight. 327 Harlan Street. And attached a live photo Isolde, taken just seconds ago. Still in the agent's arms. But now, her eyes were open. The warehouse at 327 Harlan Street stood at the edge of an industrial graveyard. Forgotten buildings, broken windows, and the eerie silence of places long abandoned but not empty. Callista stood alone under the flickering yellow light of a rusted street lamp, the cold wind biting through her coat. She had come without backup, just as the message instructed. No phone, no tracking, just the key in her pocket and a name in her heart that now felt uncertain. Isolde. Her footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement as she approached the main door, which hung ajar. Inside, the air was thick with dust and damp concrete. Somewhere in the distance, machinery hummed faintly, like the heartbeat of something mechanical and buried deep. As Callista stepped inside, every nerve in her body screamed. But this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. Whatever was about to happen, she needed to see it. She needed the truth, even if it shattered her completely. A single hanging bulb illuminated the center of the warehouse. There, standing beside an old medical gurney, was the man who had escaped custody. His hands now visible, open, empty. And in his arms, wrapped in a gray blanket, was Isolde. Her eyes were wide open now. Alert, watching everything. Too quiet, too still. Callista stopped, frozen by the sight. Give her to me, she said, her voice trembling but steady. She was never meant to be yours, the man said calmly. But you changed that. You bonded with her. That was never part of the protocol. He spoke like a scientist discussing a failed experiment, not a child. She was engineered to carry something. You were chosen for your stability, your silence, your ability to disappear. He took a step forward. But something happened. Her development accelerated. She started to imprint. Callista felt her chest tighten. She's not an object. She's not an experiment. She's mine. The man tilted his head, almost curiously. You don't understand. She's not even the first. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph, blurred, old. A girl, maybe 6 years old. There were others. None survived past the second year. But she did. Because of you. Tears welled in Callista's eyes. So what now? You take her back? Start over. Her voice cracked. You won't touch her again. He smiled faintly. That's why you're here. To make a choice. He placed Isolde Adeline on the gurney. Open the lockbox. Use the key. And you'll understand everything. Callista stepped forward. The metal box sat in the corner of the room, waiting. Hands trembling, she inserted the key, turned with a soft click. And inside was a file with her name on it. But the photo on the first page wasn't hers. It was of another woman, identical to her, smiling and holding twins. Callista stared at the photo in her hands. The woman, same eyes, same bone structure, same cautious smile, was her in every way but name. Beneath the photo, bold black letters spelled out, Dr. Celeste Whitmore. The file was thick, stuffed with medical reports, lab notes, and classified memos. She flipped through pages with shaking fingers, each word unraveling her reality. Celeste wasn't just a genetic donor. She was the original. Callista wasn't her own person. She was a replica. The man watched her silently. You were never meant to know, he said. You were the success, the one we let live outside, the one raised with a normal life, unaware of where she came from. You were a control experiment in the truest sense. And when we needed the next phase, Isolde, we brought you back in without you even realizing it. His voice was calm, clinical. You were the vessel. She's the purpose. Callista backed away from the file, tears blurring her vision. No, she whispered. I have memories, a childhood, parents. Her voice faltered. They loved me. He nodded. Of course they did. They were placed there to raise you. That life was carefully built. We needed to know how one of you would develop in a normal setting. And you did better than we imagined. He gestured toward Isolde, who now sat calmly on the gurney, watching them both with eyes far too aware for a child. And she became more than data. She became yours. That was unexpected. Callista approached her daughter, her creation, her child. The labels didn't matter anymore. She knelt in front of the gurney, touching Isolde's small hand. Warm, real, human. I don't care how she was made, she said softly. She's mine, and I won't let you take her from me. Her words weren't a threat. They were a promise. A fire lit in her chest. Whatever you started, it ends with us. The man sighed. You have no idea what she's capable of. He pulled a small device from his coat pocket. With one signal, she becomes property again. You're not ready for what comes next. But before he could press the button, Coda burst into the room, snarling. Orson followed seconds later, weapon raised. Drop it. Now, he barked. The man hesitated, then obeyed, lowering the device to the ground. Callista scooped Isolde into her arms, holding her close. The warmth, the scent, the weight, all real. No science could fake what she felt now. Orson approached, lowering his weapon. You okay? He asked. Callista nodded, but her eyes never left the child. She's mine, no matter what they say. Outside, the night was quiet again. A woman once erased had reclaimed her name, not the one given to her in a lab, but the one she chose for herself. And as Callista walked away with Isolde in her arms, a new future began. Not engineered, but earned.